Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is part 1 of a brand new series by the fantastic author Hey Peter. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share, it really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but as of last night, the channel was at 23,955 subscribers, ever so close to 24,000. What I'd really love to do is finish the year at 25. Of course, I can only do that with your help, your likes, your shares, your comments, creating a buzz, and creating a bit more pull on the channel. Thank you as ever for all of the support you guys show me, the wonderful comments. I read each and every one. I desperately keep trying to find a day that I can sit for at least 3 hours and start replying to some of your comments. Bear with me on that one, guys. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into part 1 of a brand new series entitled I Kill Monsters for an Interdimensional Government. Here are some stories. Part 1. Let's get straight into that. I think it's kind of hard to explain exactly what I do for a living in one concise and understandable sentence, but I'll try anyway. My name is Jamie, and I kill various monsters, beasts, and various other paranormal beings on the request of my boss, who runs an interdimensional city under the all-binding fist of autocracy. If that sentence sounds like a confusing handful, it's because it is. Hell, I hardly even understand what I'm doing, and I've been at this job for months now. I'm not sure if I should be more floored by the fact that being a paranormal hitman is my first and only job I've ever had, or the fact that my boss first hired me during a class of summer school gone horribly awry. I was 16 at the time of my initial employment, and so I was a naive and foolhardy kid who didn't really understand the gravity of what I was getting myself into. So I took the job without a second thought. If you notice any bad decisions or poor planning on my part, blame my naivety. Before anyone objects and says how inhuman and cruel it is to hire a child as a hitman, let me assure you that my boss takes utmost caution and care one can have while commissioning a hitman. I can personally attest that my boss is always looking out for me, one way or another. It's hard to explain, but I really trust the guy. He gets me. We have a personal connection, him and I. The boss initially hired me because I happen to perfectly fit the mould of characteristics and qualities he looks for in the various clients he has around the country. He described me as brave and chivalrous when he scouted me. 2 descriptions that don't really seem like qualities that a hitman would have. But you really have to look at the bigger picture to understand my boss's mindset. I'm being tasked with protecting the sum of the human population, essentially. The existence of the paranormal is largely unknown to the human race, save for a few shadowy government branches and my fellow clients tasked with dealing with them. I hunt monsters for a reason, after all. And to better aid me with this job, I was given some nifty items and a particularly special ability to boot. As soon as I agreed to become one of his clients, he gifted me with the ability to cause matter to decay at a cellular level. Just a touch, a superpower my younger self would have gone nuts over. I'm expecting some questions about that statement, and I'll say for now that I had to find this power on my own. Boss doesn't like me asking questions about it, says that I need to find out for myself, or some nonsense like that. I don't really get his train of thought, but I trust him to know what he's talking about. I discovered this power during my first encounter with the paranormal. I was being chased by the zombified corpse of a school faculty member. A long story. In desperation, I grabbed his neck to try and get him off my tail, but I found that when I touched his neck, my hands began to smoke and I felt his neck slowly turn into ash between my palms. I prefer calling it a technique, but you can feel free to call it a superpower. I haven't exactly found a precise way to control it. It more just activates whenever I want it to, and when I'm touching something with my hands. As you would imagine, this has come in super handy while on the job. My preferred method of utilization is to wait for my target to either be asleep or distracted, and then I disintegrate their throat via strangulation. If they can't call for help, then it makes my job so much easier, and I can eliminate them without the threat of being seen. Next, I aim for the eyes by poking them with my fingers. If the Odyssey taught me anything, it's always easier to deal with a blind monster than one that can see. I'm not implying that all my targets even have eyes or throats to attack. I'm just laying out my preferred strategy to dealing with my targets. The ones that don't have either are far more challenging, but I've managed to deal with the few that come up. For the items I was given, I got a whole goodie bag full of them. Night vision goggles, a medkit, high-powered flashlight, and various other tools crammed inside of the backpack. Funnily enough, I use these tools for less than I probably should on contracts. I say the flashlight comes in most handy, maybe the goggles come in close second. Now, normally, I would have kept my mouth shut. Would it be keyboard shut? And not let any of these details fly. But my boss said it was fine to write about, stating that something along the lines of, "Who would believe you anyway?" Well, I can't really argue with that. So here I am now, typing down my experiences and stories I've had in my line of work over the past couple of months for your entertainment. If I manage to survive my upcoming contracts, then I might be able to keep updating here with new and exciting encounters with ugly bastards I kill for a living. For today, I'd like to ease you guys and girls in with my very first assignment I was tasked with, the Dogman of Macon County. If the name doesn't suggest it, this was one mean-looking son of a bitch. Imagine a 7-foot tall, burly man with an outstretched nose and a snout of a canine, and who glued the hair of someone's sheepdog to his skin with Gorilla Glue. Allow me to detail how I go about finding my targets. Firstly, I receive a letter in my mailbox at a random date with pictures, location, and a brief outline of whatever my target is that I'm assigned to. I'm given a date that I need to eliminate the target by, and as long as I do so by that date, I get a sizable payment in the form of a wad of cash in the mail. It's strange to think that someone as influential and otherworldly as my boss would use the postal service to communicate with me, but I've learned that he has a certain fondness for this system, and so I'm fine with him using it. These paychecks aren't cheap either. Despite it being an otherworldly being with an alien currency, my boss has a seemingly infinite amount of money to give to me per paycheck, ranging from thousands up to $100,000. Initially, I received my paychecks through direct deposits, but I didn't want to make my parents suspect me of doing an illegal activity when I got wired a couple of grand seemingly out of nowhere. The picture I got of the Dogman was taken somewhere in the middle of the woods behind a tree, looking like one of those shoddy Bigfoot photos. Despite the poor quality of the photo, I could still make out enough details of the Dogman to make me shudder. I had until Friday of the next week to take this thing out, but I didn't want to let the procrastination get the better of me. And so I headed out the day after I got the letter, bringing with me the medkit and the goggles I got from the backpack. I told my parents a lie about having a sleepover at my friend's house, and they took the bait and wished me a good time. As I said, I was naive and didn't realise what I was getting myself into, and so I never once thought that I could easily get slaughtered and die in the middle of a forest, leaving my parents with another dead child. Coordinates on the letter led me to Macon County, a small hole-in-the-wall community that looked like they'd skipped out in a technological zeitgeist of the 2000s. The entire community was forested, a rural area full of farmlands that stretched as far as the eye could see, full of browning magenta radishes, monstrously sized potatoes, and more livestock than one could ever need. Flocks of fluffy, plump sheep and herds of fat Holstein cows ate the bountiful grass and frolicked in the plentiful farmlands. Each house and barn in the county was made of dirty wood and crumbling brick and looked like a sneeze away from collapsing altogether. The most modern building they had that wasn't a drinking hole was an old McDonald's located near the farmer's market, and so I paid for a large fry and parked my car in their parking lot. But once I got there, I resigned myself to playing the waiting game. It's not a fun game, but it's a game you've got to learn to play if you're trying to kill someone discreetly. Well, thankfully, I got to McDonald's around 6:30 p.m, so it would only take a little over an hour for the sun to set and the moon to come up. And so I sat snug in my car and munched over my oversalted fries. Once the sun had set, I hopped out of my car and grabbed the night vision goggles and held them up to my eyes to navigate the forest where the Dogman roamed. Sadly, these goggles proved to be less effective than they were made out to be. I should have been suspicious that they looked like a bulky pair of binoculars, rather than the typical military headset optometrist machine crossed that real night vision goggles look. But I was hopeful. Looking through the goggles was like looking through an old video camera from the 90s. Choppiness, grainy textures and motion blur all over. I could see my surroundings well enough, but it wasn't up to snuff. The temperature had dropped by 10 during my hour-long waiting game, but I thought ahead enough to bring a coat. What I didn't think I had to bring was any sort of weapons that would give me an edge if I had to fight this thing. I ended up picking up a big stone near a tree in case I had to put down the Dogman and bludgeon him to death. Let me tell you, that fucker can hide like you wouldn't believe. The only reason I ever found the guy was a narrow, flattened makeshift path made from the scattered fallen leaves. I followed that trail and it led me to a small, cosy looking cabin right in the middle of the woods. The country was fairly remote to begin with, but this was a step above that. Who builds a cabin in the middle of absolutely nowhere, in a forest? Was living in this remote town just not isolated enough? I saw the scratched up wooden door in the cabin rattle from side to side, so I hightailed it back and hid near some leaves to avoid being seen. Out of the door came a sight I will never forget. It was a bulky man who looked nearly 7 feet tall, covered in dark hair so coarse and thick it looked like fur, walking out of the cabin, tilting his head to the left and right as if he were looking for someone. I was confused at first, but the gears were turning in my head. This was the Dogman. He shared the thick hair and the ridiculous height, but he lacked the canine face that the beast in the photographs had, and I knew why. This Dogman was a werewolf, and right now he was in his regular human body. I'm not implying being 7 feet tall is normal, but it's a sure of a heck lot closer to being normal than having a dog snout and stealing farm animals for food. The Dogman went back inside his house and rattled the door again, locking it shut. As monstrous as my target looked when he was transformed into a furry, he was still a human underneath it all. There wasn't a full moon out, and so I guess it made sense that he hadn't transformed. My knowledge of werewolves is basically non-existent, but I think I understood the logic behind their furry transformation. I got up from my hiding place and walked towards his house, but I stopped dead in my tracks when I took a second to rationalise what I was doing. Was I really going to kill this guy? No, I had to take this guy out, monster or not. Monsters like him aren't supposed to be here. They're products of being exposed to the monsters roaming the city my boss rules over. Another long story. How one becomes a monster is through the various beasts and energies that leak out from my boss's city, Pandemonium. It acts as something of a port city between dimensions, so all forms of beasts roam the streets at night. The guards he hires to protect the city are kinda shitty at their jobs, and so he gets people like me to mop up everything that escapes from the city to Earth. However, not all monsters are made like this. It's common for those escapee monsters to attack and spread to their regular human population, increasing their numbers. I don't know if the Dogman was an escapee or a victim of an attack, but it didn't really matter. He needed to die. So I can keep the world safe and not let them find out the existence of the paranormal. The forest felt a lot lonelier and foreboding when I went over the facts, and so I decided to check on the Dogman through a window in his cabin. He was fast asleep, thankfully. Taking deep breaths, I crept up to his door and placed my palm flat against the door, slowly disintegrating the spot by rotting the wood. Once my hand passed through the other side, I reached my arm up and around the doorknob and twisted it unlocked and let myself in. The Dogman was in a deep sleep, grumbling a booming snore that sounded like he had an unhealthy amount of phlegm stuck in his throat, and it was trying to escape. I walked gently towards the bed as he slept, feeling the warmth of the crackling fireplace envelop my body from the chilly air. The cloak of darkness largely hid the house in the shadow, but the fireplace put a spotlight on the cosy living room, decorated with an antique oak couch with a bearskin rug underneath. Considering who I was dealing with, I was sure he made that rug himself. The wall closet to his bed was filled with taxidermy heads of various animals, deers, bears, even a caribou, all mounted proudly on wooden plaques. I stopped focusing on the details of the cabin and quietly marched towards the snoring monster, my rock at the ready. I stood over him, raised the rock high above my head, prepared to slam it down directly into his head. I won't lie, my arms were shaking something fierce and my breath caught in my throat. I was hesitating and unsure if I was really capable of bludgeoning this guy in his sleep. I tried to reassure myself that because he was asleep, he would be killed painlessly if I was able to crush his skull quickly enough. I'm not sure if I was breathing too hard or this was fate getting back at me, but he woke up and groggily looked at me with tired eyes. After a second, he jumped out of bed with a phenomenal speed and lunged at me, slamming me into the ground and making me drop my rock. I came face to face with him, and he was already starting to change into his werewolf form. In hindsight, I still don't know how he was able to change into his werewolf form so quickly, but that's neither here or there. His face began to stretch and contort grotesquely. His nose began to morph into his face, which expanded like a fleshy Pinocchio snout. His pupils dilated and his teeth and gums shifted into sharp, fang-like teeth of a Rottweiler. Without wasting a moment, I jammed my hand into his face and tried to claw the spaces where his fur didn't grow in yet. The few fleshy spots were beginning to melt like peeling paint, and he recoiled, jumping off me and clutching his face with his claws, whimpering like a puppy. I rolled and got back up onto my feet and scanned the ground to find my rock. Instead, I saw a rusty black fireplace poker leaning against the fireplace, so I grabbed the poker and dipped the top of it into the fire, letting the metal heat up. I spun around and charged at the werewolf, who had stopped clutching his face and snarled at me, a look of utmost primal rage in his eyes, his human eyes. I lunged and swiped the poker across his face with as much fury as I could muster, slashing through his fur and flesh like a hot knife through butter. I popped his eye and singed. Popped his eye and singed the right side of his cheek, causing him to howl loudly. I recoiled and jammed the poker into his right foot, twisting the poker until I heard the cracking of bone. I wasted no more time with lurching at him, grabbing his neck, thick and furry, and doing my best to strangle him in time so his throat could crumble away to nothing. My violent and sudden attack caught him off guard, and soon his dog-like whimpers became more and more muffled as my hands took hold of his throat, rapidly getting slimmer between my fingers. I felt chunks of hair and dust pass through my fingers as his cries became muted and his pupils dilated with the cold gaze of death approaching him. I had held onto his neck for so long that his head was too big for his dwindling neck to support and would have snapped at the slightest touch. I let go and let his lifeless body slump against the floor, blood pooling all around his lifeless body. I felt a rush of adrenaline disorient me, making me lose my balance and tumble to the floor. I killed him. He's dead at my hands. It felt so surreal. Never in a million years could I envision myself to be a killer, even if what I was killing was monsters. Everything felt so disingenuous. Being a child hitman, killing people with superpowers and fire pokers, I would have laughed at the absurdity of it if I was in a better mood. Something just didn't sit right with me. I came into this mission feeling righteous and cocky, but now reality crushed and I finally felt the weight grasp on me. I could have died. It was blind luck and quick thinking that kept me alive, really. I came in with almost no plan, no weapon, and expected to come out victorious and unscathed. I mean, I did kill him and come out virtually unscathed, but it all felt so hollow. I was looking at this as if it's a game with clear-cut winners and losers, but I was deceiving myself from the truth. I'm a cold-blooded killer, and I just slaughtered a man. It was for a good cause, right? Who knows what kind of violent mayhem he could have gone on to do, had I not done what I did. It's for the good of everybody, no matter how I feel. But I knew I had to become accustomed to this feeling. This was the life I agreed to. This is my career, my calling. I had no idea how Boss would react if I quit on the spot, nor did I want to think about it. I got up from the floor, yanked the poker from the werewolf's foot, and disintegrated it, letting the dust fall to the floor. I wasn't sure where to go from here. Would anyone come looking for this guy? I knew Boss would gather the corpse and scrub any evidence of the crime, but he would still be missing. I just prayed that he was living off-grid, isolated from the world. His house seemed to suggest that, and so my hopes weren't unfounded. I left the cabin and made my way back to the McDonald's parking lot, using the night vision goggles to guide myself. I sat down in my car and let the events play in my mind again and again, soaking up what just happened. I wasn't keeping track of time, and so I had no idea how long I was sitting still. Only when a faint glimpse of the morning sun gleamed through the sky did I come to and snap out of my internal conflict. I turned on my phone and saw that my bank account just received a direct deposit. I opened my app and saw that $7,500 had just been transferred to my account by an unlisted source. I still don't know how banks never caught on to the boss's direct deposits, but I'm sure he has his reasons. Once I saw the money, I knew what I needed to do. I can't be this naive and foolhardy. I have to be ready. I need to be prepared, come in armed to the teeth with weaponry, knowledge and an airtight plan and come out on top. The only bills I had to pay is car insurance, and so I had thousands of dollars at my frivolous fingertips. I decided there and then that this paycheck would go to all the things I needed to get an edge and survive my new occupation. I need to learn how to fight, I need weights to train with, and I need gear to cover my tracks. I felt a flicker of determination through my entire body as I started my car. I didn't want to go home just yet, but I didn't feel safe being a sitting duck out here. This is my life now. I need to get used to this feeling. I've promised myself that no matter how long I live, I will always remember this day and how it made me feel. And I've kept that promise to this day. And I'm in a more confident place because of it. And that's the tale of my first kill. If I manage to survive long enough, I'll add some more stories about my career. But I probably won't go in exact order. Variety is the spice of life, you know? For now, I'm signing off. Have a good night, everyone. I'll make sure to report back in with a tale I'm sure everybody will enjoy. Cheers, Jamie. I kill monsters for an interdimensional government. Here are some stories. Part 2. Let's get straight into that. It's been a while, hasn't it? I hope that the submission is enough proof that I didn't get murked on the job. But I feel kinda bad that I left everyone in the dark for so long. And so, as my condolences, I'm going to give everyone 2 stories. I know, I spoil you guys and girls, but how could I not feel so generous when my first part got so much praise? I owe you all something big, and this is my way to thank you. Before I get into my stories, I feel that I need to address something important. I got a comment addressing the whereabouts of the government branch I offhandedly mentioned in my first post, asking me if I was a victim of mind wiping and if I was okay. For those of you who don't know, the old high school I attended was a victim to an absolute paranormal shit show that rocked my worldview and landed me this job in the first place. It started right in the morning during a class of summer school I was in with 2 other students. We received an emergency weather warning over the intercom during an intense thunderstorm. But the announcement gave us peculiar instructions like not contacting 911 instead of telling us to wait for emergency services to come find us. As I later learned, these emergency services were actually a squadron of highly secretive government agencies tasked with eliminating the various monsters that began to roam free in the school. I've yet to ever get an official explanation as to how these monsters ever got to our school in the first place. But I'm assuming that they got there like how nearly all monsters get to Earth, through Pandemonium, the interdimensional city Boss rules over. If you want a good reason as to why people have jobs like mine, this is it. I don't know how many lives were lost that day, nor do I really want to entrench myself in the details. People like me do our best to ensure that this doesn't happen, and that regular people don't have to become aware of and die at the hands of these things that shouldn't exist in the first place. To summarise the event, all of the survivors were escorted by that government branch and were treated with some type of mind drug or hypnosis. I wasn't there, so I don't have a clue as to what they did, and they forget the entire incident. The story they told the media was that the extreme weather conditions caused the school to shut down, and the various EMS people came in and rescued them. I never saw any firefighters or cops near the school, but it's possible they came later, once I and a friend had left the school. I don't know much about the government branch that managed to cover all of this up, but I can say for sure that it was definitely not the first paranormal encounter. The few agents I met seemed way too at ease and comfortable for this to be a new experience. I did, however, see a logo that they all seemed to be carrying around. A patch with 3 skulls holding a book, fist and a blank bore diagram in their mouths respectively. For clarity, I'm going to be referring to this organisation as the Skulls until I can find an official name for these jokers. I'm reluctant to search for them on the internet, but the little searching I did held absolutely no results for them. Not a Wikipedia page or even WikiLeaks page in sight. I really wouldn't recommend trying to find any details about them because their reach and influence is pretty frightening and can land you in some hot water. I had an encounter with them some time ago that I discussed in the comments section, but I'll elaborate here. A couple of days after I escaped the school, my mother heard a knock on the door and found that 2 strange men, as she described them, were standing there, looking intimidating and professional. They were wearing matching black suits and sunglasses, and so she couldn't tell them apart. They asked her about the weather disaster at the school that occurred and wanted to know how I got home from the event. I lied to Mum and said that I drove home as soon as the emergency broadcast played, so that's what she told them. According to her, both of them left in a hurry and drove off right after, and haven't come back since. I don't know how this sounds to anyone reading this, but hearing this recounted by my mother was deeply concerning. They know where I live, and there's probably a good chance they know that I remember everything, making me a target to their insidious mind wiping. Sadly, the claustrophobic feeling of being watched has stuck with me to this day, putting an enormous amount of pressure on me. And for this reason, I always like to cover my tracks, both in the literal sense and the metaphorical sense. I only pay for things in cash, always use a VPN when I'm on the internet, and I try not to give away too many private details about my life, even when I'm typing here. I know I might come off as being paranoid, but I know that my efforts weren't in vain. If I'm not careful, I'll get caught and mind wiped. I managed to escape with someone named Philippe, who at the time was my best friend. In a way, we were survival buddies. We managed to fend off the various monsters roaming in the school and escape the school with the skin off our backs and drove home. Philippe may have been my first and only friend, but he meant so much more to me than that. He was my better half, someone who understood me and accepted me for who I was. I cherished him with the understanding and thoughtfulness of a brother, and the Skulls took him away from me. They found him and stole his memory without a second thought, feeding him a lie about a weather phenomenon in place of what really happened that day. When I called him, he didn't recognize me in the slightest, and now wants nothing to do with me. As much as it hurts to lose him, I really think it's for the better. This line of work is dangerous, and so the fewer people I associate with, the chance of them being injured or killed is minimized. All around, it was a complete fucking disaster that I don't ever want to go through again. I'm sorry for going on such a tangent there. I just felt like I needed to get some things off my chest. Now that that's over, let's get started with the 2 tales I have for tonight. Keep in mind that the numbers I list with these targets are in order based on how many I've I've taken out. Target number 12, Hybrid. By this point, it's been nearly 2 months since my first target, so I was considerably more prepared and confident with this contract. I started a fairly intensive workout schedule designed to build muscle as fast as possible, so I could stand fighting chance against my targets and not get torn to pieces in the blink of an eye. And by then, I could effectively bench press my body weights with the help of a pound of protein powder every day. I'd also managed to find a remote little shop far from home that sold various old military tools at an affordable price. I accumulated quite the pretty penny over time, and so I had completely free range to spend as much as I want on whatever I could conceal. I ended up buying a fantastic vintage olive green army jacket with loads of nifty pockets to store all my tools in, and the sharpest looking knife I could find, which was an elegant and exotic kukri knife. Over a foot long with a black handle, this baby looked sharp enough to chop through wood and bone alike. And so I paid with cash and headed back home. Was this kukri illegal to carry? Most likely. But I still had no easy access to firearms, nor did I know how to fire one, and so, for the time being, I was stuck with the melee weapons to defend myself. According to the report, I got sent in the mail. Hybrid appeared to be some type of roughly humanoid insect creature that stalked the city streets of Dryden in the dead of the night. I lived in a rural area, but the city was only an hour-long drive away on the highway, so I could get there reasonably quickly. If I'm being honest, Hybrid theory didn't really seem all that imposing. Standing at only 5'6" and described as barely fitting into a baggy grey sweatpants and hoodie, it was always seen wearing. I really didn't see why I was told to take this thing out, and by my account, it seemed likely that this was just some eccentric manlet who liked to take late-night walks. I didn't see any mentioning of it being dangerous or hostile to people, but I didn't really question the contract and got my gear ready for the night time. And since I would be roaming the well-lit city streets, I left the night vision goggles at home and only packed my kukri and flashlight with me. I started keeping my med kits I had in the car, and so I was all packed and ready to become a city slicker for the night. I fed my parents another lie about heading out to a friend's place for the night and zipped down the highway, enjoying the cool night breeze on my face. As much as I enjoyed the wind blowing through my long wavy hair, I felt I should get a haircut. I love the length of my hair, but I'm not very fond of the ponytails or buns. Long hair tends to cover your eyes if not properly maintained. And just as I was considering a stop at First Choice, I already pulled onto the ramp to get off the highway and get into the city, and got an eye for the environment. Compared to the brief view I had of Pandemonium, the city of Dryden was a drab and dull place of oatmeal. The ruddy browns of buildings and ugly greys of the roads and sidewalks weren't anywhere near the level of thrilling sights Pandemonium had to offer. The sloppy, lazy building shapes all throughout Dryden gave the impression that the entire city was still a work in progress and carried the amateurish appearance of being built by a rookie architect. Each building had flat, square roofs and 4 rectangular walls that didn't line up correctly, which complemented the warped, crumbling sidewalks that hugged the erratic buildings so tight it seemed like the concrete was fusing to the brick walls. I realised that comparing a drab southern Canadian city to a multi-dimensional sci-fi looking daytime utopia is hardly fair, but I still felt like it didn't measure up. I navigated the cramped streets and pulled into a well-worn parking lot, paid the dusty parking meter in cash and started to scout the streets, looking for a short humanoid dressed in baggy grey clothing. While I combed the illuminated streets, I began to think about what exactly I was hunting. The name Hybrid stuck out to me as being both perplexing and unnerving. It was described as being a humanoid insect-like creature, and so I instantly thought of the Fly and imagined a mutated, gooey, fly-slash-human monstrosity roaming the streets, leaving chunks of flesh and ooze behind in its trail of sloppy slime as it dragged its decaying body across the street, bringing great terror for anyone misfortunate enough to gaze at its ugly mug. I tried looking for a dark alley or enclosed space I could hide in to spot out Hybrid while being cloaked by night, but I didn't have any luck. The buildings were too close to each other to have any sort of hiding space, While I continued to look, I noticed something a bit odd about the city. Something I still don't understand. Dryden looked completely vacant, like no one had lived there for a fair bit of time. I didn't expect such a homey-looking city to be bustling on a cold Wednesday evening, but even the smallest cities and towns had a few people loitering around at night. Hell, even the rural farm town I hunted the Dogman had more people around at night. Despite all the light provided from the rustic street lamps, I couldn't see a person, animal, tree or anything. I thought to myself, surely this can't be because of a hybrid, right? I'm just psyching myself out. Everyone is asleep. I pulled out my phone and the clock read 10:34 p.m. People still have work and school tomorrow, so it makes sense the streets will be dead. At least it makes my job easier. Less people, fewer witnesses. I got tired of looking for an alley to hide in, so I decided to try and scale the wall of one of the buildings and perch myself on the roof and play the waiting game for the hybrid to come outside. The building had a pretty squat, and so I didn't have much trouble jumping off from an empty trash can and hopping onto the flat roof. I rolled onto the roof and laid flat on top, preparing to scout out any potential sightings of hybrid. And sadly, the waiting game was still as boring and unintuitive as ever. It's not a game one can really improve at, but only find ways to take shortcuts. And for me, my shortcut was fiddling with my cookery. I swung it around like a baseball bat, holding the grip tightly and hearing the crisp air swooshing around the blade. I tried to swing it around like a lightsaber, but I didn't have enough fitness to look intimidating when I did. And for some stretch of time, I spent goofing off with my blade. I began to smell something strange approaching from the streets below. I could only describe it as a musty combination of mothballs and copious amounts of cheap perfume. It stuck out like a sore thumb among the damp and the homely smells of Dryden, and so I poked my head over the ledge of the roof, and sure enough, I saw exactly where the reporter detailed. A person cloaked by massively oversized grey baggy sweatpants and a hoodie, shambling through the streets, shifting from foot to foot, like it was drunk. I wasn't expecting to be terribly frightened by the hybrid, but seeing it up close was almost comical. From where I was sitting, it looked even shorter than the report said. It claimed it stood at 5'6", but from what I saw, it was no bigger than 5'1", barely managing to fit inside the clothes it wore. I was confused as to how the report I was given was off by so much by height, but I didn't know who to blame. Boss didn't make these himself, only gave them to me. I continued to watch the clumsy figure stumble across the street, looking completely inebriated. I tried to get a better view of its face, but the grey hood completely obscured it. I was worried that I had spotted a regular person walking instead of my target. I wasn't able to see any of the insect-like features hybrid was supposed to have, and so I was still very much on the fence as if I should pounce on it with my knife. My gut was telling me to just wait for a quieter opportunity to strike, and so I stayed hidden and kept my eyes on the figure. I kept on watching as it walked across the street, but it didn't look like it had anywhere to be specifically. It was moving aimlessly, changing directions and stopping in place seemingly at random. The distant sound of crickets made the figure jump and faced a small patch of grass near a park bench. The grey-clad figure skittered on the ground and collapsed, resting on its hands and knees on the grass, and I finally saw what it looked like. Its hood had flipped back, revealing an uncomfortable mishmash of human and insect features, reinstating my theory of this monster looking like the Fly. The figure had greasy, brown hair tied into a painfully tight ponytail connected to a grey, scaly scalp that was swamped with moist brown droplets of sweat. The hands were covered in needle-thin hair with black, leathery skin that was as dark as the night sky, with 3 sharp pincer-like fingers jabbing at the grass, looking for something. They quickly found their target, the noisy cricket making noise nearby, and plucked it out of the grass, raising a quivering insect above its gross head. It was hard to see the thing's head from the angle it was standing at, but I did catch a glimpse of its massive mosquito-like compound eyes. They were so large that it nearly took up all the space on its already large head, leaving maybe a quarter of its face untouched by the two massive spheres. A shiver went down my spine seeing the thing's gangly appearance in all of its skin-crawling glory. Hybrid then stuffed the squirming insect into its hoodie pocket and flipped its hood back up with its malformed hands, darting towards the street. Christ, that thing was fast. It hit the ground running and bolted so fast that I had trouble even spotting it. It turned a corner with great speed and darted around a small house, and I peered over the side of the roof to see. Hybrid swung open a door behind the squat house and jumped inside, locking the door behind it quickly. I waited a couple more minutes to ensure Hybrid would stay inside that building and slowly descended from the roof, landing on an old recycling bin on the ground. I quietly paced to the house Hybrid ran inside and pressed my hand against the doorknob, causing it to turn into dust. I pushed the door open slowly and was greeted by the smell of mould and must. I covered my nose with my sleeve and tried to spot Hybrid inside, but the darkness inside the house was hard to see through, and I didn't want to potentially draw attention to myself by turning on the lights. I tiptoed through the tiny home, avoiding the rotting furniture and peeling wallpaper scraps on the floor. Was this Hybrid's house? Or just some house they happened to occupy for tonight? I knew nothing about Hybrid's sleeping patterns, and so I was completely in the dark, metaphorically and literally. I found a small set of stairs and walked upstairs as slowly and precisely as I could, making sure not to cause any creaks. Once I got up the entire staircase, I was met with a tiny white wooden door that positively reeked of a pungent mould smell, mixed with a sickly sweet scent that I had become far too familiar with, the smell of rotting flesh. Hesitating to go inside, I crouched and tried to see underneath the door. I saw the outline of something. It was too dark to see, but I could make out a general cone shape suspended in the air. To the left of the cone shape was Hybrid, standing on the room's ceiling upside down, clothing discarded and wrapped in two sets of massive, moth-like wings. I felt like I just stumbled upon a golden opportunity. Hybrid looked like it was sleeping, and I was a few steps away from collecting my paycheck. I slid my fingertips against the bottom of the door and rotted wood until the door formed a hole big enough for me to fit my entire body in, and I crawled inside. Once I got into the room, I carefully stepped inside the room and shuffled past all the debris on the floor. Piles of what looked like spider silk and various articles of women's clothing were strewn across the floor haphazardly, clustering around a musty mattress on the floor. Once I saw the various clothing articles, some gears started to turn in my head. The file didn't detail Hybrid's gender, but based on its height and the clothes, I could safely assume Hybrid was a female. Despite how old and mouldy this place was, it still felt lived in, like someone was still occupying inside and living in these measly conditions. It didn't take long for me to put two and two together. Hybrid lived here. It's an uncomfortable thought that the bug monster might be hiding in a nearby house with no one knowing about it, but that's why people have jobs as I do. I snuck up towards Hybrid and wrenched my hands around where her leathery throat was, clenching it tightly as I felt the squirmy flesh harden and crumble beneath my palms. Unlike the dogman in the previous part, Hybrid didn't wake up from my assault. I kept clenching my hands until both hands began to rub against each other, and I let go. Her neck was spindly enough for me to know that her vocal cords, I'm assuming she has them, she's still part human, right, were completely gone, and so she couldn't make a cry for help. I sighed deeply and felt like a weight had been lifted off my back, glad that I was able to finish this task so quickly. Strangely, Hybrid's feet didn't lose any grip from the ceiling, and she was hanging there, even after what I did to her throat. I tried to check for a pulse in her wrist to confirm if she was dead, and felt no movement. Right, she's dead, I thought to myself, preparing to turn around and sneak out. Boss was kind enough to take care of the evidence I left behind from my tasks, so I didn't have to worry about clearing the evidence. Before I left the room, I bumped into a dark cone shape that was suspended from the ceiling. I felt a warm sensation when I touched the shape, and my curiosity was thoroughly piqued. What is this thing? What kind of shit can Hybrid hoard in here? I thought to myself. I reached out to touch the anonymous object, making sure not to disintegrate it, and felt a smooth, silky feeling that radiated the same warmth I'd felt when I bumped into it. It tugged at the shape and stretched a strong piece of silk, which quickly snapped against the shape as I let go. I pulled out my kukri and made a careful, light slash across the width of the shape, and made a horrific discovery. There was the unmistakable outline of a withered, dry human body inside the shape. I stepped back in disgust and nearly dropped my knife on the ground. From the looks of it, Hybrid had wrapped some poor bastard in a silk cocoon and was draining it of all of its inner fluids. The body was so dry and mangy that I couldn't even make out the gender. All I could see was an expression of horrible, agonizing shock stuck on its face. Shit, I wasn't here fast enough, I thought to myself, feeling bad for not hunting after Hybrid fast enough. I couldn't tell how long the body had been dead for, but I knew that anybody at all was bad news and that I needed to be faster. I left the house feeling ashamed and drove back home, the horrific expression of the corpse lingering fresh on my mind. Who was that person? What were they doing in that cocoon? Were they minding their own business, or were they some type of wannabe monster hunter? I know I'll never get an answer for any of these questions, but I asked them anyway. I'm sorry if that tale ended on something of a sour note. It's just that I hate to see people hurt or dead, knowing that I could have saved them had I been fast enough. But Hybrid was dead, and it was dealt with. All I had to stress about until my next assignment was online schoolwork, and so I couldn't mope for too long. Right when I got home, I checked my mail and found $4,000 in a sealed envelope waiting for me, courtesy of Boss. Some time ago, I requested him to send me paper bills instead of direct deposits, just so my family doesn't get suspicious. And so, that was the tale of Hybrid the Bug Person. I think it's one of my more standard cases. I specifically chose a more standard case for the first tale, so I could detail how an average hit is played out, so the craziest stories I tell feel as strange to you as they do to me. But the next one won't be quite as successful. This one is one of the shitter cases I've done, and it still doesn't sit right with me. Target number 13. The Lover. Like I said last time, this one was a strange case. For starters, this was my first case where my target wasn't an identifiable entity that I could ambush and take out without a second thought. The Lover was a whole-ass house situated a couple of neighbourhoods over from mine, and it looked completely unassuming. I'm going to keep this place name anonymous because I don't really want this to be traced to where I live. I didn't do the same for Dryden because it's nowhere near close to where I live, and so I don't need to concern myself with my location being discovered. The house in question had bright yellow walls with pristine white windows that blended right into the bright and inviting community it was located in. If the reports on Hybrid was lacking, then holy shit, you haven't seen anything yet. Lover's report was completely infuriating to read. All I got in the report was a picture of the house in question, its location, and a one-sentence description of the house. I honestly thought there was some kind of major typo, or a page was missing from the package. I rummaged through the envelope that came to me and felt nothing inside. What was I supposed to do with this? I didn't even know what I was hunting for in the first place. Was this some type of haunted house? I knew nearly nothing about this place and I was still expected to do my job. What was I supposed to do? I had no leads, no idea what I was even hunting for, and no clues whatsoever. And if that wasn't bad enough, I had 3 days to finish this task. I was so angry that I seriously tempted myself to crumple the report right there where I stood and shove it back in the mailbox, but I clenched it to my hand tightly and immediately went to my car, determined to scout out the house. Once I entered the location of the neighbourhood in my GPS, I slid my favourite album disc into my car CD slot and tried to relax and stop being so angry about this piss-poor report I was given. Again, I don't think Boss is to blame for this, but as soon as I finished that case, I reminded myself to set up a meeting with him, just in case. I spent the 10-minute drive blasting sent anger out of my speakers, and all my frustration melted away as if it were never there. Say what you will about the quality of that album, but it subsides negative emotions better than any therapy. Once I arrived inside the neighbourhood, I parked my car near a sidewalk and stepped outside trying to point out the house in the picture. After walking for a couple of minutes, I found the house in question. It looked exactly the same as it did in the picture, but I noticed that the front lawn looks dry and stringy, as opposed to the noticeably green of the grass pictured in the photograph. I suppose this photograph could have been taken at an earlier date, but it didn't matter to me. What really mattered is that I needed to find out what exactly I was hunting for at this house, and find out quickly. I kept my distance from the house in order to not look suspicious in front of this neighbourhood. Everywhere I looked, there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary. Aside from the drying grass, the house looked to be in peak condition. The walls, windows, roofs and everything else I could see looked well maintained and prim. The driveway of the home was empty and the garage door was closed, so I couldn't see if there were any cars inside. My vantage point wasn't enough. I knew I had to break inside the house, and somehow. I can easily melt the doorknob and let myself inside, but avoiding a family inside would be an extra challenge. I had only 3 days to finish this hit, so I didn't have the time to wait around and wait for this family to leave the house. I headed back to my car in order to sit down and think of a plan. But I noticed a figure dressed in bright purple hoodie crouching beside my car, sitting on top of a skateboard and trying to light what looked like a cigarette. I sped up to him and shouted at him, hoping to intimidate him away from my car. "Hey, get the hell out of my car!" I shouted at him, trying to sound intimidating and imposing. The figure jumped up as soon as I shouted and fumbled with his cigarette, nearly toppling off his skateboard. He stood up clumsily and glared at my direction. "Fuck off, man! I'm just trying to light a dart for a second," he shouted offensively, clearly sounding rattled. "Don't care what you was doing. Get away from my car. Go line up somewhere else," I responded coldly. He tucked the dart and his lighter back into his lofty hoodie pocket and walked towards me, fist tightly clenched. "They don't park your damn car on the sidewalk if you don't want people to use it as cover for lighting darts. Why the hell did you even park here anyways?" He questioned me angrily. "None of your business. Now scram, buddy." My retort caused his angry expression to soften and turn into a slight one of disdain. "You were going to the old Macmillan house, weren't you?" He didn't phrase that as a question, but as a statement. "Macmillan House? Is that the name of the house I'm after? How the hell does this guy know more than I do?" I thought to myself. It's silly that I'm the guy whose job it is to deal with the paranormal threats, and I'm more in the dark than some random skater boy I spotted next to my car. "Macmillan House? Is that what they call that place?" I asked him, hoping to pry more details from him. The skater boy sighed and plucked his battered skateboard off the ground and tucked it under his arm. "Yeah, it's kind of a local legend around these parts. From what I've heard, no one can actually confirm if it's been abandoned or not. People have tried to knock on the door to see if anyone lives there, but they don't want to talk about it afterward, so we just kinda tolerate it," he said, sounding like that explanation was something he had to say many times. The gears started to turn in my brain, and I was curious. "So it's likely the house itself that's the issue. Am I supposed to burn it down?" I asked him another question. "Why is it called the Macmillan House? I thought no one lived there." He darted his gaze from me and rocked himself on his heels. "Well, someone used to live there, but they..." He trailed off and started to fidget with the board in his arm, looking noticeably uneasy. "They died," he said quietly. An uneasy tension filled the air around us, and my previous theory of the house itself being the target was starting to look less likely. It was either the ghost of this Macmillan fellow, or the house itself, like the movie Monster House. I needed to know more, and this guy seems like my golden ticket. "You mind if I give you something of an interview on that house? Let's talk about it over lunch. My treat," I offered. He perked up when he heard I was going to pay and stopped fiddling with his board. "It sounds like you're coming on to me, but alright, sounds cool. I know a place not too far from here that we can talk about it. Name's Connor, by the way," He shoved his hood from his head, revealing his neck-length, wavy brown hair, and stuck his outstretched arm at me for a handshake. I ignored his suggestion of my intentions and gave him a firm handshake, and we headed off to the urban-looking pizza joint. I ordered us a large pepperoni and anchovy pie, and we took our seats by the window. The large man working at the cash register greeted Connor by his first name and made no comments about him bringing his skateboard into the building, so I assumed those two were close, or at least close enough for Connor not to get yelled at. Connor had already scoffed down 2 pieces of the pie before he spoke a word about the house, leaving me to nibble on my first slice and patiently wait for him to start talking. Right, so from what I've heard, an older guy by the name of Eric McMillan used to live in that house some time ago. This was before my time, so you'd have to ask an older person if they remember him. And the thing about McMillan was that he really didn't socialise with any other neighbours. He just kept to himself, Connor explained, speaking over mouthfuls of anchovy pizza. I had a notepad and pen scribbling down notes as he spoke, carefully writing down every detail I could hear. This did change after some time, but people don't like to talk about it, he finished. I raised my eyebrow in curiosity. Care to elaborate? I asked. Connor darted his gaze from me and finished the slice of pizza in his hands. McMillan never liked to talk to anyone, but he did have one thing that made people turn their heads: his car. It was this big ugly pickup truck that looked like a day away from collecting dust in a scrapyard somewhere. Every time he did leave for work in the morning, the sound of this beast revving up would wake up the whole damn block, and people would get pissed. And then one day, he drove his noisy car to work and never came back. He just disappeared. Connor started waving his hands around with his speech like he was trying to emulate a pantomime performance. Initially, people thought he was going on a vacation, but around 2 months of him not returning, people got suspicious. I don't know if it was a concerned citizen or someone trying to rob him, but someone went inside his house. I think the front door was left open too. My curiosity was hooked, and I was on the edge of my seat, avidly waiting for Connor's explanation for this precarious situation. Well, the person who entered that house found quite a few interesting things. Firstly, it looked like he wasn't very hungry when he left, because there was a full meal left on a plate on his dinner table, rotting. All of his lights were turned on too, and from what he could gather, it seemed like he just up and vanished from his house. But something was off. His house was fairly well kept, but there was a particularly foul smell coming from the closet upstairs. The way his voice seemed to trail off and become quiet at the end of his sentence told me all I needed to know, but I kept my mouth shut. The guy opened the closet and... "Have you heard of the Byford Dolphin incident?" he asked, sounding sheepish and uncomfortable. Byford Dolphin? The fuck is that? I thought to myself. No, I've never heard of it. Mind telling me? Connor exhaled a lofty breath and grabbed one of the 2 remaining pizza slices. Basically, a couple of deep-sea divers were victims of explosive decompression, which is when the air pressure is so disgustingly powerful that your body just crushes itself under the pressure. That's what I think it is, at least. Those 4 divers were under such pressure that their bodies were squashed into the size of a pipe. Now, not a lot of things get to me in this line of work, but the image of a human body being so powerfully compressed into a tiny space sent a gnarly shiver down my spine. And when that home invader opened that closet, he found the exact same thing. What was left of McMillan was crammed into a small jutting pipe from his wall, spilling guts and bodily fluids into a sickly trail. Naturally, the cops were called and they swarmed the house to look for evidence, but they hit a wall pretty quickly. Some fucking how, there was 0 fingerprints anywhere in that room. Not a single smear or suggestion of DNA in that entire room. Not to mention, how the hell do you even shove someone in a pipe that small? I wasn't there, so I'm not too sure what happened after that, but I do know that the house was completely avoided afterward. All that nasty business drove the neighbours away, and no one wants to buy the house. I think it should be demolished, but God knows who gets to decide that. Connor finished his final slice and shuffled in his seat, rolling his skateboard on the ground under his foot. The conversation we had was super insightful, and it kinda made me feel like a detective. Well, that really gives me some valuable insight. Thanks a million, Connor, I told him, expecting him to finish the last slice of pizza. Connor flashed his palms at me defensively and made a grievous expression. Just tell me you won't go in there, right? I don't want you snooping around in there. I sometimes see people try to sneak in there, he said, sounding nervous. I still needed to go in there and finish my job, but I didn't want to give him any reason to worry. Oh, don't worry, I won't, I promise, I lied to him. He relaxed and slumped his shoulders, a casual smile widening on his face. Thanks, man. Don't want to stumble across something gross, you feel? He said calmly. We shook hands again and said our farewells, and he skated away once he left the shop, leaving me the last slice of pizza and the bill. Once I paid my bill, I walked back to my car and went back to playing the waiting game, thinking about my game plan for storming a house without being seen. I still didn't actually know what I was hunting in this house, but meeting with Connor indicated that it was most likely a ghost roaming a house it owned in its previous life. I told myself that if I survived this, I would have a strong word with whatever muck my boss got to write these half-assed reports. Around 9:30 p.m, I parked my car inconspicuously in a fast food parking lot and made my long trek back to the neighbourhood, cookery tucked into my jacket pocket. I arrived around half hour later and avoided the streetlights and crept up beside the house, looking for a window to enter. I found an unlocked window and quietly slipped it open and slithered inside. I was expecting an uncomfortable, dishevelled home like Connor had described, but I was surprised to see just how dark it was. To say the inside of the house was pitch black was a complete understatement. This place was absolutely Vanta black. Not even the creeping light from the window made this place even a little bit brighter. I literally couldn't see anything. No items inside the house, not from the outside the window, not even the light from my phone was able to illuminate the room. I begrudgingly took small steps and relied on my ears to navigate myself. I wanted to find the closet Connor mentioned that Macmillan was found disfigured in. I wasn't sure if his spirit would be contained in there, but it was a place to start. The sound of my footsteps creaking against the wood floor was my only guide, apart from my hands waving frantically to ensure that I don't bump into anything. I bumped into what I thought was a table, and my heart leaped inside my chest. Eventually, I felt the soft touch of a carpeted step on my hand, and I smiled confidently. I found the stairs, now to find the closet. I walked up the narrow staircase and placed both of my hands against the parallel walls. I kept them against the walls as I walked along the hallway, and eventually they found a wooden door. I brushed against the brass doorknob and entered the room, and felt a frosty sensation rushing all throughout my body. The house itself was a reasonable temperature, but this room I entered was at least 10 degrees lower, and my fingers already began to twitch. I'm still not sure if the temperature change was the fault of a shitty AC or something ghosts can just do, but I don't really care to think about it in hindsight. I hugged myself and walked through the room, my whole body shivering fiercely. I tried to find another door inside this room, but I was only met with cold walls. Every second I didn't curl my fingers, they got colder and colder, and I could feel them starting to hurt. I shoved them inside my pockets and instead opted to rub my shoulder against the walls to find something instead. I felt the metal leg of what I assumed to be a bed bang my foot, and I winced in pain. Just as I was ready to abandon this room and find another, I felt a groove in the wall and felt wood. This is almost definitely the closet that Macmillan died in. I quickly reached for the door handle, but I felt possibly the coldest thing I've ever felt in my life against my shoulder. It was so horrifically cold that the frosty temperature in the room was a heat wave in comparison. I felt my shoulder sear and burn underneath my jacket, and I whipped my body around to face what grabbed me, but I could only see the Vanta black that surrounded me. That same icy hot feeling on my cheek, and I tried to slap that feeling away and catch whatever it was causing it. I came into contact with the hand of something dreadfully thin. I only grabbed it for a second, but I'll never forget how thin and sharp the knuckles felt on my hand. The ghoulish hand started to gently stroke my cheek and rub tufts of my hair in between its icy fingers. I was completely frozen in place. I had no idea how to react. The cold was certainly an important factor, but the sheer wrongness and morbid factor of a ghost caressing my face gently disturbed me to my soul. I felt another morbid hand rubbing my shoulder in a manner that reminded me of how Boss would do. The kind of shoulder rub that communicated an oceanic level of fatherly appreciation and love. And this private sensation I felt coming from such an awful and ghastly source was a feeling of shame, loneliness and spite, all rolled into one awful touch. My heart dropped when I felt a third hand rub my upper back as if it were intending to comfort. I have no idea how 3 hands could be attacking me all at once, but that was the last question on my mind. I remained completely still in terror as all 3 hands continued their assault. I wanted so desperately to lash out and attack my invisible assailant, but I was quashed under their frosty embrace. I grit my teeth and stayed in place, but the soft feeling of a kiss on my cheeks made my fighting instinct flare up with an intensity of a raging bull. I swung both arms as fiercely as I could at the hands and felt my fist slam into the cold flesh, hearing a soft crack. I turned my body around and punched straight forward, feeling another strike against the cold, bony flesh. I heard it drop against the floor, limp and stiff. With my blood pumping, teeth chattering, I slammed my foot down onto the floor where I thought the hand was to try and disable it, but I only heard the slam of wood underneath my foot. I mindlessly kept stomping on the ground around me, praying that I was able to find the fallen disembodied hand and break it apart. During my physical tirade, I heard a second set of stomping feet in the distance, which began rapidly approaching me. Before I knew it, the footsteps followed me into the room I was in, and I heard a voice call out to me. "I told you not to go inside! Are you serious? You could get killed in here!" It shouted at me, sounding both angry, but carried a hint of concern. I recognised who the voice belonged to as soon as I heard it. "Connor? Is that you?" I asked into the Vanta black space, hoping I was right. I stopped stomping my foot, and the footsteps continued to approach me. The sound of a heavy metal object being dropped onto the floor rang out repeatedly. The crunching of bones followed shortly. "Yes, it's Connor. Get inside the closet," Connor told me, sounding out of breath. He opened the closet door I was struggling to open without any issue and pushed me inside. "I know it's still pitch black in here, but I need you to help me stomp on this pipe on 3, all right?" he said again. I couldn't see my own feet in front of me, but with how small the closet was, I was able to feel the pipe tap against my foot. 1, 2, 3, he shouted, and we both slammed our feet down onto the pipe. Giving both of our weight, the pipe dented quickly, then was torn from the hole in the wall it jutted out from, and almost instantly the room's temperature became more akin to the rest of the house. I breathed a sigh of relief that it was all over, but Connor was less than happy. "You fucking idiot! Why would you go inside the house when I told you not to go inside?" he shouted, his words booming and reverberating in the compact closet walls. I wanted to say something in reply, but he grabbed my shoulder and led me out of the closet. Wordlessly, we marched through the dim house, bumping into walls and furniture as we tried to navigate completely blind. I found the window I had entered and slipped it open, crawling through the narrow entrance. The night sky was a sight for sore eyes, and I took it all in gratefully. Connor followed suit and marched towards me angrily. Inside the pocket of his hoodie, I saw some type of dark, blunt metal object, likely the weapon he used to attack the hands. Neither of us said anything to each other. Either we both waited for the other to speak first, or we were both trying to intimidate each other. I didn't let him get the upper hand, and we exchanged menacing glares with each other. After around a minute of staring daggers, Connor finally spoke up. "Look, you clearly have some shit going on. I really don't have time to deal with this right now, but we need to talk about what just happened. In some time, I'm going to find you, and we're going to have a serious conversation about this, okay?" he said, sounding aggravated. This made me question just how much Connor really knew about the house we were just in. I assumed he was warning me as a concerned citizen, but obviously he knew far more than he let on. And for just a moment, I worried that he knew about my job and about Boss. He spun on his heel and trudged down the dark road, and I went in the opposite direction to my car. The lengthy walk was filled with curious thoughts of how suspicious Connor was and how miserable this hit was. I wish they just told me to stomp on a pipe and leave. Was it really that hard? I'm glad that I was able to survive past this hit so I could complain to whatever dunce made these files that were given to me. I walked back to my car and drove straight home, white-knuckling the steering wheel the whole damn time. I kept thinking about Connor's offer in the back of my mind. I didn't really know what a meeting between us would entail, but it couldn't be good. When I got home, I checked the mail and found an envelope with $15,000 inside. A decent amount of money, but still felt hollow for all I had put up with. And that's the tale of how I got harassed by a bunch of ghost hands and ended up meeting one of the strangest people I've ever met in some time. I've yet to have any sort of contact with Connor as of yet, so I guess I'll just wait if he ever comes to me. I know he isn't one of Boss's proxies, and so I can't really begin to track him. Thankfully, after these 2 hits, I did manage to get a meeting with Boss about the quality of these reports and did get something out of it. But I've got on far too long now. Next time I'll post, it won't be quite as lengthy, but I'll think of something good. For the time being, I still need to focus on online schoolwork. It's easy, but there's a lot of it to do. Stay safe, guys and girls. Jamie. Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff. Wonderful story. Thank you ever so much to the author there for allowing me to make a rendition of their absolute wonderful work. As ever, guys, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. If you have a story you'd like to share on the show, why not get that over to myself on the website, of course, which is www.dmtforesterfear.com. I hope you're all well and happy and having a fantastic week at school or work. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.